Did you get the YouTube stuff started?
Yes. Buh, 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 buh. We are live.
Yes, sir.
We are live. After a 2-week hiatus, we're back.
We are back.
And we're not doing an intro this time.
So we are going straight into the action.
Straight into the nitty gritty. I mean, we're just going to talk bullshit for a few minutes until you guys get tuned in and everything like that. But
Yeah.
one of the other things we didn't do, we didn't let you guys know that we were coming on this Friday.
We didn't.
This
wanted
is
to be a
not
surprise.
this has been like this has been like one of the most busy weekends of my life. Okay, so my sister is getting married tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, that's always
So
crazy.
that and then side work, all that good stuff is going on. So you've got some people tuning in now. What's up, everybody? If you are watching this, please hit that like button for us as many times as you possibly can and the share button. It helps out big time. Really appreciate that. Helps get that video out to some more people. We have some pretty exciting news.
I liked.
Yes. We have some pretty exciting news from UMA Lure Company. Yeah.
Kevin, planning isn't our strong suit. Yeah, that is very true, Kevin.
Oh, look.
Oh, you got it working. Look at that. You got it working. That's awesome.
Gosh, yes, it works. It's awesome. It's kind of slow, though.
Yeah, it was a little behind, but I guess there's probably a little lag in there. Makes sense.
Oh, there's an alert delay.
So turn that alert delay down.
Do that.
Hell yeah. I
Alert
want to know
delay.
when.
Where's the sound?
I don't know. It's fine.
Yeah.
We'll play with it later. Save those settings. You've got
Cue.
to save them at the bottom. Perfect. All right. So anyway, let's go back to our Facebook. Por favor. So we can see who we
Facebook.
got here.
Kevin.
So we got Kevin Parsons in the house. Kevin, shout
Hammer.
out to
It's being
shout
a
out,
hammer this year.
shout out to Kevin and Chad for
Broken neck and all.
for peer pressuring me into fishing last night. So I wasn't supposed to be fishing last night.
Yeah, why were you peer pressured into fishing last night? What's the story?
So I was under doctor's orders to not do any sort of physical activity. And so I just kind of rolled. I got off work kind of early and just kind of rolled down to the ramp to bullshit with the guys, and I got peer pressured into going home and getting my boat, much to my wife's dismay. Candace was not happy about that. I thought I was going to be in the doghouse, and turns out it was. Turns out it was a good decision, I guess, because I won. So
It helped pay for the doctor's orders.
yeah, help pay for the Renaissance Festival tomorrow.
Are you still going to that too?
I am.
Nice. A day of walking with
300
with the swollen giblets.
that 300 that $300. Yay!
That's me.
That $300 I won last night's gonna buy a lot of turkey legs.
Yeah. A lot of turkey legs.
Gonna be a lot of turkey legs.
I've never been there. Are the turkey legs that fantastic?
I don't know, but I've never been there either. But that's all I hear about is the giant turkey legs.
Okay.
So, what's
turkey
going on, Zach?
Turkey legs it is then. Fantastic.
I don't know.
We're going back to the basics tonight.
Yeah, we are going back to the basics, and that kind of goes in with, what I did last night to win that tournament is really going back to the basics. So you kind of get, out, it's summertime, you want to make that frog bite work because
Yeah.
everybody loves catching fish on top.
Who doesn't like catching frogfish?
So, I've been struggling catching fish out of the grass, or at least catching the right fish out of the grass.
What's up, Joe?
So I just, last night, we went back to the basics, and I flipped a jig all night. I threw a spinnerbait about 4 times. Threw a crankbait a couple times in one area, which I did lose one on a crankbait that would have helped me, but yeah, just flipped a jig all night. Old school black and blue jig, chunk trailer,
Jack, black and blue jig, regular chunk trailer,
black
just
chunk
picking
trailer.
everything apart. So was it a fast paced bite, or was it just one here, one
was-
there? But the ones that mattered are what ate it.
It was a very slow bite for me anyway. I can't speak to anybody else that was fishing last night. Um, I had a very slow bite. I came into one area that I thought was going to have quite a few boats in it, and ended up having it all to myself. And I picked I went flipping wood, and I picked every piece of wood apart. I got 2 decent bites uh, relatively early in the first hour. I think I had like a 3 and a 2.5, and then I got back to another area and just wanted to fish one spot in that area. Started fishing there because I know it doesn't get fished a lot, and flipped up next to a tree and caught one almost 6. So nothing wrong with that, right?
What's up, Miles? Hey, Deborah. No, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, and it kind of goes back to where we're talking about with going back to the basics. I mean, like, I don't know, basically anything you can do can be basic, but it goes down
so when
to
I say
the
basics, so let me tell you what I define as the basics.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say you got 4 or 5 categories that I consider the basics: jig, Texas rig, crankbait, and spinnerbait. That's what I consider the basics. Those 4 techniques are what I consider the basics. So, it's really just relying on working those baits in the area, because for the most part, we get into a lot of this fancy stuff, um, and with Ned rigs and this new stuff, Ned rigs and chatterbaits, and not saying chatterbait's not a good bait; it's one of my go-tos. But
Mm-hmm.
when I say basics, I'm talking about the stuff that I grew up bass fishing with. Your Texas rig, a Texas rig lizard, a 7-inch power worm, uh, a black and blue jig. These are all things that I grew up bass fishing with.
A white spinnerbait.
A white spinner bait, a black spinner bait.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that I grew up bass fishing with. That's what I started that's how I learned how to bass fish, was fishing those baits. A square bill crankbait. Just fishing a square bill crankbait on wood. I was throwing shout out UMA Lures. I was throwing a UMA Lures crankbait last night. However, I did lose one on that crankbait. That would have helped me, but
Well, it's a good thing that UMA Lures is putting on
it is. We
a
got a special offer.
bass and beer promo
Special
all
offer
the way
that we'll-
through the month of November. Special offer.
We'll talk about that a little bit later. Go into
Stay
it.
tuned.
Stay tuned. But so that's really what I'm talking about going back to the basics, is really getting away from a lot of the hype, because there are a lot of lures out there, and it doesn't matter if you're just into like normal bass fishing, or if you're into, like, I know you're into like a lot of the JDM stuff. There's a lot of hype around a lot of that stuff, and we can get locked into that. We get locked into that hype,
Guilty.
and I'm just as guilty of it too. We try to force things to work. What going back to the basics does is, you take those 4 categories and figure out what's working. Just stop trying to make things work, and let the fish tell you what's working.
Yeah.
So with the water conditions last night, I even changed my, I let the water conditions dictate what I was throwing. So when I got to my area, the water was a little dirty. Actually, before we even got into the tournament, I noticed the water was a little dirty at the ramp. So I immediately, I had a green pumpkin jig tied on. I immediately tied on a black and blue jig that had rattles in it. So did that at the ramp. Knowing that the water was dirty, we had a big storm the other night. I knew the water was going to be muddy. Big jig with rattles. So I got to my area and I just started picking apart wood. And I started out throwing a spinner bait, and I threw a spinner bait. I threw a spinner bait for 15 minutes and didn't get a bite. Actually started throwing a jig, picked up the spinner bait, threw the spinner bait, and didn't get a bite on the spinner bait. So picked the jig back up. Went a little ways, caught a nice one, about a 3-pounder. Well, actually, the first one I caught was 2.5. Yeah, so I caught a 2.5, super tight to cover, textbook muddy water fish. I mean, it was a brushy treetop, like gnarly brushy treetop, flipped right into a hole. There was a hole about yay big, and flipped into that hole, and I just hit it immediately. So okay, I'm like, okay, that tells me they're tight to cover, makes sense. It's muddy water conditions, probably going to be a tough bite. I know for me anyway, one of my confidence baits when it's a tough bite is jig, and I think it has a lot to do with that bigger profile. Because I did throw a bigger profile jig. I was not throwing a.
You weren't throwing a finesse style jig.
I wasn't throwing a finesse. You know that I throw like mini flip a lot.
Right.
Real small profile jig. I was throwing a big half-ounce jig. A big regular size half-ounce jig with a.
That's what all your bites came
with a big chunk trailer on it. Because I wanted to move a lot of water. Like I knew, okay, I'm gonna have to move a lot of water. I'm gonna have to. I'm basically gonna have to make them. You're getting an more of an aggression bite because bass do not like when things are in their area. So not necessarily a feeding bite. I'm looking for that aggression bite. So caught a couple doing that, and then caught that big 5.85. Doing the same thing. Now I was when I got back to another area, I was fishing some rock. I lost about a 3-pounder on a crankbait. And then caught one on a crankbait that didn't help me.
I'm glad the square bill made your list for back to the basics, because there's one subject that I love nothing more than to talk about than crankbaits. I love talking about crankbaits.
Dude, I love crankbaits, and I have neglected the crankbait for the last couple of years.
Never neglect the crankbait. Especially when you have UMA lures crankbaits on your side, which is literally, in my terms, from what I say, is deflection at its finest in the world of crankbaits.
It is a fantastic crankbait. That is what I was throwing last night.
Yeah.
One of the ones that Tyler custom painted for me. It should have had a good one on it. My fault. It was totally my fault. My drag was not set on my reel, and I felt the line slip when I set the hook. Never got the hook in it. Never got the hook into it good. Got it 3/4 of the way back to the boat, and it came off.
I really think that his crankbaits are just super good for the GP in general. It's like specifically, we fished the GP a lot. We're talking about the Thursday night reefers. His baits are just so anti-snag. There's so much to get called on, I feel like, in the gunpowder, and I'll throw that thing up in just about any laydown.
I can tell you that I was fishing one of the canals when I first got his crankbaits, and this is when very early on when he first started making crankbaits. It's actually still the same crankbait I was throwing last night.
Yeah.
It was one of the first ones that Tyler made, first square bills anyway, and I was out with Kevin Parsons. We were just out messing around, and I'm like, I'm gonna try this crankbait out, and I threw that crankbait into every laydown in that canal and got it snagged one time.
Yeah.
Like every laydown. I mean, I was pulling it over branches, through treetops, and I got it snagged one time. And it's just they're so his square bills are so good at coming through cover. his other crankbaits are as well, but his square bills are what I fish the most. I absolutely love his square bills. I will tell you that it is the probably the best square bill on the market.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because Tyler sponsors the show. I've been fishing them before I was part of Bass and Beer Radio. You know, Tyler sent me. He sent me some crankbaits to try out. He made me some custom that were custom painted, and I have been fishing them ever since. I will bash my Ultrex into anything to get that thing back.
Yeah.
I have hung it up on limbs and just going in.
Yeah.
Full steam. We're getting this crankbait back because
mean,
it's that good.
They are phenomenal cranks. There's craftsmanship behind his crankbaits, man.
Yeah.
Tyler sits down there. He makes these things by hand, paints them by hand, tunes them by hand.
He has done a phenomenal job.
Ships them by hand. Everything that you get is from Tyler, made by the man himself, and he just makes an excellent bait. Really, really stoked to have him supporting us because,
Yeah,
man,
absolutely.
do I love his crankbaits.
Yeah, I do love his crankbaits, and kind of got on our soapbox there about UMA, but getting back to the basics, a square bill crankbait it's a great search bait, especially we fish a lot of shallow tidal water here, and our bass are shallow year round, so it is a good search bait.
Fantastic search bait.
In shallow water, and being able to it's part of being with those 4 baits that I mentioned. That's part of being able to put the puzzle pieces together, because you're gonna if you have 3 or 4 hours out on the water, you should be able to figure out pretty well if they're going to be chasing or if you're going to have to go flipping and dragging. So if they're chasing, you're going to find that out pretty quick by throwing a crankbait or a spinnerbait. So that's 2 of our categories. So those are your chase baits, your spinnerbait and your crankbait. You'll be able to, you're going to figure that out pretty fast, if they're going to eat a moving bait with one of those 2 baits. Now, you have to, again, like I just mentioned, you have to be able to put together the pieces of the puzzle. You can't force them to eat something. I mean, we can talk about it on another show, but if you're just trying to figure out what's going on, those are the 2 baits that I'm going to start out with. If I haven't been on a body of water in a while, again, river systems, we're fishing tidal, shallow, a little different than lakes and stuff, but
Depending on what I'm picking up for my 2-2, like I'm not going to pick up a crankbait if I'm fishing a bunch of grass either. You know what I mean?
well, true, yeah, but I'll pick up a spinnerbait though.
Yeah.
So that's why we
yeah.
have those. We have those as too. So if that's my, if I'm fishing grass, I'm probably I'm going to be throwing chatterbait or spinnerbait. But,
Crankbait, spinnerbait, Texas rig worm.
but as far as going back to your basics, those we're gonna start with those 2 baits first, crankbait or spinnerbait, because if they're chasing and they're actively feeding, you should be able to catch them on both of those. Jason, that is funny because the first year that I was down at Anna, Snails was on the back of my boat, and I am throwing an 8XD in 19 to 22 feet of water on a point, and this mofo on the back of my boat throws a 1.5 square bill out over 20 feet of water and catches a fish. I kid you not. 20 feet of water, throws a square bill, boom, catches one. It was hilarious. But so as far as going back to our basics, so we're starting out with our moving baits. Mm-hmm. We have 2 moving baits and 2 slow baits. So our 2 moving baits, spinnerbait, crankbait, I'm going to alternate between those 2. If I'm fishing, we're going to focus on tidal water.
Depending on what we're fishing.
We're going to focus on tidal water. So I'm going to be fishing probably shallow wood. Covers most of our tidal waters. We can find shallow wood in just about every tidal water that we have in Maryland.
Yes.
So spinnerbait, crankbait, I'm going to go back and forth. And like I was mentioning earlier, you're gonna know pretty quickly if they're going to eat a moving bait. And if they're not eating a moving bait, that's telling me I need to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can go to our other two uh, back to basics baits, which is we have a jig and a Texas rig, whether it be a Texas rig worm or a Texas rig lizard, Texas rig Senko. It could be any of those things that you want. The difference between that jig and that Texas rig
Is rate of fall.
not profile.
Profile
size.
and rate of fall.
Well, because I can adjust rate of fall with either one of them.
Yeah, by putting on, weight.
Bigger weight, heavier
But
jig,
I'm thinking
different trailers, et cetera, et cetera.
my
So-
thought process when we talk about throwing a Texas rig worm is always weightless. Obviously
Yeah, sure.
you can throw them with a weight, obviously, but a lot of times if you're throwing a spinner bait, crankbait, you're not getting hits on that, so you want to go to something that's a lot more slow. A weightless option. I like the weightless rigged options a lot. I feel like it just kind of suspends there in front of their face just a little bit longer.
So that's going to be my after, like, beyond the basics.
After the jig is
We'll call
not
that-
working anymore.
We'll call that beyond the basics because even with a Texas rig, like I'm going to throw a traditional Texas rig with a quarter to 3/8 ounce weight.
Yeah, right.
First, like, because I feel like in a lot of the water that we fish now, we do have some deeper water around, so rate of fall makes a big difference. But when we're fishing, um, we'll say 1 to 3 feet of water, I don't think rate of fall matters as much as it does in 5 to 6 feet of water. And for me personally, I like a faster rate of fall anyway. I've talked about this with Rob before. Where if Rob gets on a tough bite, he really lightens it up and goes to a real lightweight with a slow fall. Not me. I'm throwing a half-ounce weight on that, and I want it to fall as fast as possible through that treetop. Because I'm trying. If the bite's that dead, I'm looking for a reaction bite.
You're trying to get them to just eat something because it
I
flashed
don't want
in
them to
front
have.
of their face.
I don't want to. Yeah, I want them to have
time
as
to think
little
about
bit of
it.
time to think about it as possible.
Exactly, right.
So, on to our basics. Like I'm starting with a jig, and I would say 75% of the time I'm throwing a half-ounce jig. I feel like a half-ounce jig gets bigger bites than a 3/8 because it's got a bigger profile.
I would definitely agree to that.
So bigger profile.
It
You get
also
a
depends on your plastic, too.
It does, but just the jig itself has a bigger profile, bigger
Yes.
profile, bigger hook.
Yes, it does.
You're just throwing a little bit bigger profile. So 75% of the time I'm throwing a half-ounce jig. If I'm fishing extremely shallow water, I'll throw 3/8. So if I'm throwing a jig into, let's say, 6 inches to 2 feet of water, I'll almost always throw a 3/8 in that because then I can get a little bit softer presentation, and that really matters when you're throwing stuff that slow. But that's going beyond the basics a little bit. So 3/8 half-ounce jig. Sometimes that depends on the trailer that I'm throwing. Sometimes that depends on how fast I want that jig to fall. But generally, like I was saying before, I'm going to start with something. I'm always going to start with something that's pretty fast moving
Right.
because I'm always looking for a reaction bite. That reaction bite, I feel like I get more reaction bites than feeding bites when I'm throwing a jig. One of the reasons that I like throwing a half-ounce. When that half-ounce jig, if I'm flipping a piling, if I'm up in the Northeast and I'm flipping docks, that half-ounce jig coming down that piling, it's hitting the piling, it's knocking, it'll knock stuff off the piling, and when it hits the bottom, you get a poof.
I like the
Because it hits-
castability of a half-ounce jig more. Just
al-
like the flipping process, I feel like is
also
a little bit
easier to-
easier with a
It's
half-ounce jig.
also easier to skip a half-ounce jig.
Right.
Kind of seems kind of counterintuitive, but it's easier to skip a heavier jig than it is a lighter jig. Think about it. If you think about like skipping a stone, you want a stone that's got a little bit of weight to it versus something that's like a piece of slate that's super light.
Right.
So same thing with a jig when you're skipping a jig. So that's one of the other reasons I throw a half-ounce jig a lot because I will I if I have a jig on, it's getting skipped. At some point in I will not go probably 5 casts without skipping it at least once. Because there are just, there's certain areas that I'm going to skip a jig into because I know that 9 out of 10 people that fish in that area can't put a jig in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
So, overhanging trees, where there's trees that are overhanging, where those branches are like right at the surface of the water. You're not pitching up under that tree.
Now I have a question for you. Since we're talking about basics, what's more basic than a spinning rod? And why is throwing a jig on a spinning rod not more popular, other than the fact that a bait caster is quicker?
So, for one, I think the most important thing about throwing a jig on a bait caster is in infinitely more accurate when you're trying to make, especially when you're flipping cover and you're just trying to make very precise pitches, and I'm only 15 to 20 feet away from my target.
Mm-hmm.
It's infinitely more accurate. Try, if you don't believe me, take a spinning rod out and a bait caster. If you're proficient with both, try an underhand pitch with a spinning rod and try to put it 20 feet away without making a splash. It's next to impossible because you can't control the line speed.
No.
Whereas with a bait caster, I can control the line speed, and I can make a half-ounce jig enter the water almost making no ripples. Do I do it all the time? No, because I think most of the time it doesn't matter. But when it does matter, it's important to have that aspect where you can present that bait,
have that ability,
especially on a lot of the areas that we fish because they're so pressured.
I was kind of looking at it at like a backlashing perspective. I feel like spinning rods in some ways are more sensitive. And like that
has a
the
lot
way
to do
you're
with
kind of just
line
kind of
depth.
jigging with a spinning pole, I feel like just kind of has that.
I think that has a lot to do with the line diameter because we're
You
typically
know?
throwing lighter line on a spinning rod.
I just
I'm not throwing.
You have your guides are on the bottom of the spinning rod, and I feel like you get a different feel on a spinning rod than you kind of do when you're throwing on a bait casting rod. And I've actually recently, the little bit that I have been throwing a jig recently, I've been throwing it on a spinning pole because it's a more of a finesse jig.
Yeah, right.
But I really like it. It's like I kind of just want to get a more stout spinning rod to throw jigs on, except instead of a bait casting rod. But I know that's like taboo. Everybody's doing it on a bait casting pole.
Jason actually brings up the other point is power for the hook set. And a lot of when you're talking about
you can get a stiff spinning pole.
I feel like just because of I cannot. It doesn't matter if I have a stiff spinning rod or whatever. I can set the hook way harder with a bait caster than I can with a spinning rod. I think it's just like the angle of the rod, like
right.
that I can set the hook way harder with a bait caster. And maybe
like
just
reeling into it and setting. I definitely it's definitely different with a spinning pole.
I think it may be like because you're palming a bait caster, so
right.
like you have your hand this way instead of this way, so you have that wrist action that takes away some of that power. Where when you're palming, you're palming your bait caster like this and you're reeling it in, it's all arm. Your wrist doesn't move. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think you can just get a little more. You can get a little more power, and not just for putting the hook in the fish. When I'm fishing a jig, I'm usually fishing pretty heavy cover. I'm flipping it into treetops. I'm flipping it into big laydowns, and I want to turn that fish when I set the hook. Like,
yeah.
If you see me throwing a jig, you watch the way that I set the hook. I set the hook, and it's not because do I need to set the hook that hard to get the hook in? No, But what I'm doing is generally, so when that bait falls down, that fish grabs the bait and it's going to turn away. So, it's going to grab the bait and it's going to turn away. I want to turn that fish's head when I set the hook and get that fish coming toward me. Because if I don't, it's going to swim away from me and get buried in that
Right.
laydown.
It's going to go wrap itself up in that laydown.
If I can turn their head and get them moving toward me, generally, anybody who's ever fought a big fish, or fought a relatively big fish on light line, if you've done like for steelhead, for example, if you can apply steady pressure in the way you want that fish to go, that fish will fight it, and then it's going to turn toward that pressure.
Right.
So if I can get that fish moving toward me, generally it's going to continue moving toward me instead of turning and trying to go away.
Right.
Now, your fight's going to go back and forth, but my initial reaction when I'm catching
to get that fish to
get it
come
out
to
of the
you.
cover.
Right.
I want to get it out of that cover as fast as possible because then I'm going to have the best opportunity to land it. So that is one of the other reasons that I want a bait caster, because even a heavy action spinning rod, I feel like I can't put as much pressure on a fish than with a heavy bait caster. Plus, I can use I use a 7.1 to 7.3 bait caster, and a 7.1 to 7.3 spinning rod is pretty unwieldy as far as from like an accuracy standpoint. So that's my reasons for bait casters over spinning rods.
And I get it.
So
I
back
get
to
it too, but it is
ultimately, and I will say this: ultimately, do whatever is more comfortable for you. That's all. That's what matters. Is whatever's comfortable for you.
Fast. Sorry, it just tasted really good.
You should probably grab 2 this time. So, that's the main point that I want to make is do whatever's comfortable for you, because it may work out better for you. One of the friends of the show, Nate Brown, he throws a jig on a spinning rod all the time because that's what works for him. And sometimes it's just with going back, like we're talking about, going back to the basics. Sometimes you just need to do what works for you, and not try to keep up with the Joneses per se.
I like that.
What?
Do what works for you instead of trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Right, because it's that's the thing. I was talking about Nate Brown. Nate Brown throws a jig on a spinnerbait. Hey,
On a spinning rod.
don't eat that.
This is a wire. This is not delicious.
He throws a jig on a spinning rod. That works for him. I can't do it. It will frustrate me to no end. Right, Jason. That's another example. Jason Stevens throws jerk baits on a spinning rod. And I get it.
Honestly, I think that's a great idea. I think a spinning rod gives a jerkbait a different action.
I don't think it gives it a different action, but I think it makes it much easier to fish, especially if you're throwing it in the conditions that you should be throwing a jerkbait in, like when it's windy.
Yeah, right. Totally makes sense.
It's way easier to cast on a
great idea though. Like
bait.
it's something that a lot of people do not utilize a spinning combo for. And the only reason that I even brought that up is because I feel like a spinning combo is just like, who didn't start fishing with a spinning combo before they picked up a bait caster?
Everybody.
For the most part.
Like
Everybody.
I feel like
That
everybody
is back to the basics. That's back to your comfort zones in a way. That's back to no backlashes, really. I mean, everybody gets wind knots and everything, which suck, but the backlashing, all that bullcrap, just being comfortable. There's different ways to utilize basic techniques than...
Scott Sewell does not own a bait caster.
Shut up.
Does not own a bait caster.
He throws all spinning rods.
All spinning rods. Because that's what works for him.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I've talked to him about it before, and he just said that's what I started fishing when I started fishing many, many years ago, and it's worked for me, so I've never changed. So, get back to your basics. What are you comfortable? If you're uncomfortable doing something, don't do it.
Try something else. There's more than one way to.
As far as baits, though, stick with those baits. Stick with that category of baits because a lot of baits that are out there now require kind of very specific types of fishing, is the best way that I can put it. You can't get any simpler than crankbait, spinnerbait, jig, worm.
Yeah.
Because the first two, you're casting them out and reeling them in.
Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty of other, you can do other things to your retrieves, and you can mix it up, but you will catch plenty of fish with a spinnerbait and a crankbait by just casting it out and reeling it in. There are some important things to fishing a crankbait and a spinnerbait, contacting structure and stuff like that, that we can get into, we can get into more detail on that. But cast it out, reel it in. Jig in a Texas rig, cast it out, drag it in. If you're throwing it into, you're going to be throwing those into laydowns and things like that.
Man, a lot
Cast
of
them
times.
out, drag it up over that limb, let it fall down.
Hey, thanks for that like, bro. A lot of times with the jigs and stuff like that, what I like to do, I'll throw it into where I want it. I'll give it a couple boops, just boop boop, boop boop. I'll just pull it right back out and hit the next spot. I feel like. Do you think that? Say you want to hit the small pocket with a jig. So you hit the small pocket with a jig. Mm-hmm. Nothing hits in that pocket. Do you think if coming over the branch and dragging it slowly all the way back to the boat is going to produce more bites than just? No. Okay, so yeah,
drag it in. When I say throw it out
in that strike zone,
drag it in what you think your strike zone is,
and then have it come back in quickly. And
I'm going to drag it to the end of the. I might drag it to the end of the. Like if I think there's going to be a fish up here on the log, and the log runs this way, I'm going to throw it up here, and I'm going to drag it the whole length of that log. But, that's your strike zone, is that structure. Out in the middle, have I caught fish doing that? Absolutely. But, it's a very low percentage area. So that's another thing that, again, goes along with back to the basics is not fishing water that you think is unproductive. And it's a mindset thing. It may be productive water for somebody else, but if you don't think that water is going to be productive, you're not going to fish it the way that you need to fish it. Think about that.
How many times have you gone to a spot that you didn't think was going to be productive and it wasn't productive though?
And it wasn't productive?
Was not productive.
Probably 80% of the time.
Yeah.
20% of the time I go to a spot and think, this probably isn't going to be productive.
Go into this with complete negativity.
But I can tell you that some of those spots that I feel that way about, Kevin has gone into and just absolutely waxed them.
Yeah, just tears them apart.
And, it's a mental thing. It's not that the fish aren't there. It's that if you don't think the fish are there, you're not going to fish it in a manner that is going to allow you to catch fish.
I will be going back to the basics next week. This week has been too busy. Will not be fishing. I will be fishing the Thursday nighter next week. And
can't wait to see you there.
Going to be going back to the basics of our fishing.
Not doing. So I do want to go back to before we get to because we always get.
We always just go down the rabbit hole.
So we were on jigs and Texas rigs. So what is making me? We kind of started to talk about it. So to me, that's a profile thing. So I have a big jig. I'm throwing a big jig. It's not getting bit, or maybe they're nipping at it. Like you'll have fish that'll just like bite the trailer on a jig, and it's annoying, and we don't like that. You go through a lot of trailers. They'll pull your trailer off.
Real quick, we're talking about jigs and Texas rigs right now.
Yes. So I'm talking, I'm flipping my jig. I started my jig, and so I started fishing with my jig because I always like that bigger profile first because again I feel like it gets bigger bites. Mm-hmm. Now,
Absolutely.
when I start noticing that I'm getting, short strikes, they're biting the trailer, that's cluing me into maybe they don't want that big bulky presentation.
Right.
So that's when I'm going to switch to my Texas rig. So now I'm going to switch to my Texas rig to see if maybe they want a little bit smaller profile. That's when I'm going to go to my Texas rig worm,
Smaller, maybe a little slower.
my baby brush hog, maybe a Texas rig Senko,
Baby D-bomb.
baby D bomb, baby destroyer. If you like missile bait, I love missile baits. It's one of my
Oh my
favorites.
God! Some of you might be throwing the Bandito.
Don't. If you throw the Bandito bug, I will.
Disown you. You're not allowed to listen to Bass and Beer Radio anymore.
I'm gonna pull the plug out of your boat.
We
before you
just
launch.
we just listed so many. We just listed several better options than.
I mean,
the
I
Bandito.
could Zoom Z crawl. I could go
The list goes on.
Yamamoto flapping hog,
Guggen's a joke.
the rage crawl, the rage bug.
I could make a better plastic than Guggen.
Any one of Bass Munitions creature baits.
I was literally just about to say, you know who makes a better plastic than Guggen? Bass Munitions.
So
Hit him up. His link is up in that bio. Check it out.
so now I've moved on to my Texas rig because I was getting short struck on my jig. So I fished my moving baits. I didn't get bit. I couldn't get anything going on the moving bait, so I kind of figured they're not eating the moving. They're not going to chase today. I started throwing the jig. The jig, I was getting some bites, but they're short striking it. They're not eating it good. Maybe I've caught a couple and they're not eating it good. They're barely hooked. They're not choking that jig like they should. I've now switched to my Texas rig soft plastic, and I would say that my go-to, my first thing that I'm going to throw if I'm switching to a Texas rig plastic is a Strike King KVD Game Hog, which is like a baby brush hog. Just a baby. It's a baby brush hog. It's made by
A
Strike.
Strike King plastic.
Yeah, I love Strike King plastics.
You like the Rage Crawls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not so. I would. If you look in my I have pretty much 3 brands of plastics that I throw. If you look in my boat, it's either Strike King, Missile, or Berkeley Maxent. If you look in any of my boxes, that's what you're going to see the majority of. Some Reaction Innovations too. I like Reaction Innovations as well, but that's the majority of what you're going to see. So, Strike King KVD Game Hog, they're super soft. I really like them.
I'm
Built
all
in
over
set.
the place with my soft plastics. I throw a lot of Yamamoto. I throw Missile. I throw Zoom. I do have some OSP plastics, some JDM OSP plastics.
So what's the
I have some Depths plastics.
what's our category of our show tonight?
Basics?
So I have tried over many years, over the last decade, I have narrowed down into the baits that I have the most confidence in.
I would say that I would go with just the
I'm
Yamamotos.
not just baits, but the brands that I have the most confidence in.
Yamamoto, Missile, and Zoom plastics.
Those are
They would just
fantastic.
get it done. Period.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, you could literally just use Zoom.
Yeah,
And you will have they make everything that you need
with a great plastic.
with a great plastic. They even make a Senko now. And it's
Okay.
good.
A
Yeah,
Zoom Senko.
it's pretty good. It's called the Zlinky. And it's pretty good. I mean,
It's hard to get me to break away from the Yamamotos.
I mean, I fish Maxent Generals.
Yeah.
I don't fish Yamamoto. I fish Maxent Generals all the time if I'm throwing a Senko style
I
bait.
feel like that's what the debate is always between is Yami and the Berkeley.
Yeah, the
General.
Berkeley is amazing. Absolutely. I don't. There is not a Yamamoto Senko in my boat except for 2 packs of 4-inch Senkos that I only throw during the spawn. That's the only time I throw them is when they're spawning on the flats in grass. So So we've gotten to. I went to my go-to soft plastic, which is my baby brush hog, your baby brush hog style bait, and I'm starting out with that because it's got some it's got some action to it. It's got it's got that like worm like action, and it's a relatively small profile bait.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured out that I was getting short struck on my jig. They were biting the jig, but they weren't eating it good, or they were just they were just biting the trailer. So now I should be able to catch them on soft plastic. I am fully confident that if you just give me those four bait categories, I can catch fish on any body of water in Maryland.
If you have the time.
If I
Figure
have
out where they are.
if you give me 4 to 6 hours, I can catch them on one of those four bait categories. Now I might change
100%.
I might change my approach depending on the body of water that I'm on. And I'm going to narrow that down to tidal water. Because I mean, it will work for lakes as well. But lakes can be a little more difficult because of how the fish migrate. They're a lot of lakes around here. The fish are going to migrate out very deep, and it really requires some additional techniques to be able to successfully catch tournament winning fish.
Yeah.
That being said, you can go to any lake and apply this same technique fishing shallow. There's always a population of fish that live shallow in a lake. So you can definitely apply this to any body of water. You just may not when you're fishing lakes where there's a strong offshore bite, it may not be the most productive pattern. But if you're new to that place and you're just kind of starting to figure it out, it's a good place to start. And hey, you can always go drag, you can always upsize things to
What's up,
fish
Martin?
that deeper water.
What's up, Dan? If you guys enjoy this post, please like this video and hit that share button. We'd appreciate it. Some fun stuff happens up on the screen.
So, talking about lakes, let's say, we're fishing, we're going to apply this to a lake. Let's get away from tidal water for a second.
Yep.
I still got my four bait categories.
We should talk about a pond one time because we all started there.
I just go throw a Senko.
It's a topic for another time.
I just go throw a Senko.
It's a topic for another time.
If I go to a pond, I go throw a Senko and catch like 41 to 2 pounders, and it makes me happy.
Oh, dude, I throw the biggest swim bait I can possibly find and catch them. It's fun.
So let's say we go to a lake and you're relatively familiar with this lake, and you know some offshore spots that these fish migrate to. So we can still go back to the basics with our four bait categories. Now we just need to change it up a little bit. Instead of a square bill, it might be a deeper diving crankbait, like maybe a DT10 or a DT14.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge Rapala fan for deep diving crankbaits.
I know old Rob loves that old DT6.
The old DT6. I love a DT6. I have an entire like you'll see my crankbait boxes are generally they're like grouped by depth. Like I'll have like
half UMA, half Rapala.
Oh no, hold on, it gets better. So I have like my square bills, and then I have like my medium diving crankbaits, and then I have like my deep diving crankbaits.
Yeah.
And then I have an entire box of nothing but DT6s, DT8s, and DT10s. And I probably have close to there's like 75 crankbaits in that box.
I know we're talking about the basics, but I know you've seen my JDM crankbait box.
Yes.
I love staring at that box.
So now we're talking about
and other boxes.
Our offshore and remember, lake fish are going to migrate, so they're going to move shallow in the spring. They're going to move deep in the summer, shallow in the fall, which is what we're getting into now.
Yep.
And then they're going to go back deep in the winter. So you have to you have to learn. It's a lot easier with tidal. It really is a lot easier with tidal water because I can catch fish in 3 foot of water or less all year round.
That
Yes.
says fish transition.
Yes. So in our tidal waters, I can catch fish less than 3 feet year round. I can catch them in the middle of winter. I can go to. I know areas where they winter.
I think we're in a big transition right now on the GP. Personally, I have not even fished the GP in the past 2 weeks, but I think we're in a transitioning.
I think we're getting there. I think it's just starting.
It's just starting, but what I mean to say is
It's
where a
gonna be
lot of
big in
where
the-
a lot
you know,
of
if
the
we get some
traffic
cool
was during the tournaments now is going to be pulled back deeper. I think.
I
I think the fish are going to pull back in now and get out of that grass as the water temperatures start to fall
they're so
because of the cooler evenings.
I'll tell you that they'll stay in that grass until that grass dies
Yes,
off.
they will, but
But
we will see more fish movement.
yes, and most of that depends on the bait movement. So once you see the bait start moving, because you're okay. So
What
it doesn't
happens
matter
when the water temperature?
It doesn't matter if you're in tidal water or if you're on a lake. You have to watch it, especially in the fall. So in the springtime, they're moving up. They're moving up because they're getting ready to spawn. So you go in. They go from their deep wintering hole. They move up because they're getting ready to spawn. They're going to feed up shallow, and they're going to spawn. They're going to move back out deep because the bait's moving back out there. In the fall, and it happens on tidal water as well, they're going to follow the bait, and the bait's going to push back into the creeks.
Because they can sense that
So
that time of the season is coming. The wintering season is coming.
So they're pushing back into the creeks in the fall. You know, it happens everywhere. It happens on Conowingo, Walker even. They're going to push. You know, they're going to push back into the coves.
If they feel that wintering is coming, why do they push back into shallow parts of coves and creeks?
So you have some of it is fall turnover. If you want to get into that, basically that's where your water turns over. So they're going to stay relatively deep because that's where the most oxygen is. Mm-hmm. And then at a certain point in the fall, that water in deeper water. This is more. It's going to be more lake oriented.
I need you.
So in your
I need
deep
you to
water-
explain to our listeners what is turnover, though, because
I'm
that's
going
an
to.
important
I'm going to.
that's an important term and definition. And
Yeah, I'm getting ready to. So, lake fishing when you have deeper water. So in the summertime, your cooler, higher oxygenated water is on the bottom of the water column. Think about it. You know, sun's beating down, temperature up here. You know, it's beating down on the water. There's lower oxygen.
hotter, cooler,
and you're going to have a thermocline. So that thermocline, you're going to have, you know, more water, more oxygenated water.
a whole nother topic.
Yeah, it's a whole other topic. So at a certain point, when that surface temperature cools down to a temperature that is equal to or less than the water that's, say, 10 feet down, the warmer water is going to rise to the top.
There's a flip in your water.
Yes. So
Your water is going to rotate.
Your warmer water, yes, is going to because it's warmer now. So we've gotten cool nights. It's cooled down that surface temperature. Our warmer water's on the
Hey,
bottom.
what's up, Tom? Live from MR Ducks, Ocean City.
So that water is going to rise to the top because it's cooler. It's going to move to it's warmer. It's going to move to the top, and that mixes up that oxygen. So that fall turnover is a really tough area.
It's the same way that you look at as hot air rises, cold air falls. Hot water will be at the top, cold water will be at the bottom. When your water at the top becomes colder than the water at the bottom, you will have a rotation, which is called the turnover. It is called the flip.
And that puts your higher oxygenated water at the top, which is going to push those fish shallow.
Exactly.
So
along with bait.
Well, right, because the bait's going to follow that.
Is shad spawn, right?
Shad spawns in the spring. They don't spawn in the fall.
What are we always seeing in the fall? We see, well, I guess it would be the shad spawn from the spring growing into the fall.
That's the bait pushing back into
exactly. It would be the shad spawn.
So you're looking at two things in the fall. Either they're going to be pushing up, they're going to be following that bait back into the creeks to feed because they're trying to put on, essentially, bass are going to eat as much as possible before the water gets cold. That's their main goal in the fall. Eat as much as possible, put on as much weight as possible before winter comes.
Yep.
So they're going to follow the bait around. The bait's going to move up shallow. It's going to move up into the creeks. They're going to get out of that open water because, the bait, as the water cools down, the bait eats the algae. When that water cools down, that algae is not going to be out. They're not going to be able to eat out in that deeper water anymore because we've had the turnover and stuff like that. So that bait's all pushing back into the creeks because that shallower water, they're going to have food sources. The bait's going to be able to eat, and the bass are going to follow those. So we talked about turnover and stuff like that. So got a little off of what I was saying. So. Fish transition is always important in any body of water, but especially in lakes. Because, again, you have deep to shallow, back to deep, back to shallow, back to deep. How the fish transition works in most lakes. Take these same four concepts. We have spinnerbait, crankbait, jig. I'll trade out the Texas rig for a Carolina rig. If you're fishing offshore, if you're fishing one of those in the fall or in the spring when the fish are shallow, Texas rig. When they're out deep, Carolina rig. Mm-hmm. You can apply those same four concepts to deep water. So let's say we have a deep point. You have a deep main lake point, and it's got some stumps on it. Or maybe it's got some rock piles on it. So that's one of those places that those fish are going to move in the summer. We can still apply the same four concepts. You just have to upsize your weight on your soft plastics and your jig. You might have to go to, instead of a flipping jig, I'm going to throw a 3/4 ounce football jig because I'm fishing, 17 to 20 feet of water. So I'm going to throw a 3/4 ounce football jig, or maybe a half ounce football jig. For my soft plastic, instead of a Texas rig, I'm throwing a Carolina rig, which I'm going to throw a 3/4 1 ounce weight on, and I can throw it out and I can fish it in that deep water. I can work it down the point. Mm-hmm. I can throw a spinner bait. Instead of throwing a 3/8 ounce spinner bait like I throw around here, throw a 3/4 or an ounce spinner bait, where I can run that spinner bait deep. I can, you can take a 1 ounce spinner bait and you can fish it. It's easy to fish a 1 ounce spinner bait in 15 feet of water. No problem. You can, because you put that on a 7/6 rod, you can throw that thing about a half a mile.
Bomb it out there.
You let it sink, just let it sink to the bottom and then just slow roll it. And then you have crankbaits for various depths. Mm-hmm. You can always pick your crankbait for whatever depth you want to fish. So same four concepts. You're going to have a high percentage of catching those fish with one of those four. Might not be the deal. It may not be the winning pattern if you're fishing a tournament, but it allows you to locate fish. And that's the hardest thing to do in fishing. And
yes, it absolutely is the hardest thing to do in fishing, and I can attest for that this season.
So use your base. Go back to your basics. Use your basics to locate your fish. If you want to, now that I found an area that has some fish, if I want to try out some new techniques, well, now I know, instead of just going out and fishing that technique, well, now I know there's fish in that area. So, for example, like I found a spot out in the grass on the flats that I whacked them on a spinnerbait. Okay, well now I want to try, this new crazy chatterbait or whatever, whatever the big blade chatterbait. Now I can go back out to that spot and test that bait that I want to try out in a place I know has fish. So instead of just going out and throwing it randomly and trying to find fish with it, I've already located my fish. I know there's fish there. Now can I get them to eat this new bait? And if they don't, doesn't mean that bait doesn't work. It just may not work under those conditions.
Yes.
But I know there's fish there, so I know, okay, come Saturday and tournament day, I can leave this rod in a box. They're not eating it. Maybe I need to throw it in the fall or the spring or something like that. It's a new bait. I kind of like the action of it, but now it's just not the right time for it. Because I found the fish using the basics. You will always be able to find fish using one of those four.
Mm-hmm.
And once you find the fish, then go into throwing your swim baits. Maybe you want to throw a glide bait out there. Some of the places out on the flats, super clear water, deep guts. Maybe you want to throw a glide bait. I did that earlier this year. We were fishing up this grass edge, and it was pretty clear. And I was like, you know what? I know there's some fish here. We've caught a couple. I'm gonna throw a glide bait out here, see if that works. And it didn't. You know what it did work on? Stripers. Okay, I caught the crap out of stripers on them.
On a glide bait?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
On the Spro glide bait.
Yeah.
And I saw them on LiveScope, and I was 90% sure that they were stripers because they were sitting in the middle of the gut, not close to any grass. I'm like, those fish look pretty big. Whoop. I was like, all right. So it was pretty fun, but I knew there was fish there. So, it didn't, you don't get as, I feel like you won't get as discouraged, or I don't personally. I don't get as discouraged not catching fish on a bait if I know there are fish there, because then it tells me, it doesn't just tell me that, if I didn't know there was fish there, I'm thinking two things. Either one, I'm thinking there's no fish around.
Right. Yep.
Which in that area,
LiveScope, if they're there or not.
Yeah, but even like shallow stuff, like I can't see them on LiveScope. If I'm fishing a foot and a half of water, I'm not seeing them on LiveScope for sure. But I may think that because I'm throwing, maybe I go up the Quarry Canal throwing a glide bait, and I don't get a bite. Oh, there's I get it stuck in my head. Oh, there must not be any fish in here because I should have caught them on a glide bait, or I should have caught them on a pick whatever off the wall bait you have.
All circumstances.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm not picking on glide baits at all. It's just anything outside of that basic category. And even with your plastics, your Texas rig plastics, like I'm keeping that simple. Brush hog, crawl style bait, and like a creature bait. Either whether it be like a rage crawl or a beaver style bait, or like a brush hog. Kind of those three. That's what I'm sticking. That's what I'm kind of sticking with when I'm talking about the Texas rig. Brush hog or like a ribbon tail worm. So I'm keeping that simple. I'm not going with like an off the wall soft plastic, like the
OSP something.
Like the
evergreen lobster crawl.
Or yes, something weird like that. What's that OSP one that's kind of like
the Do Live Beaver?
No, it's kind of shaped like a cover scat, but it's got all the like jig skirt material coming out of it. I think it's made by Debs. I think it's made by OSP.
Not sure on that one.
Yeah, it's just like it's a 3-inch log that's got like a bunch of jig skirt material sticking out of it like legs. It's Martin's telling me not to. I'm trying not to talk about it, Martin, because I'm talking about going back to the basics and keeping your stuff
Oh
Oh,
shit!
no, Brian.
Damn it!
I've been busy with tournaments. Chad's been busy with work. He's got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks since we've been live, which
Tony's
is definitely.
out of town.
You know what? That's almost. You know what? I'm gonna take that as a compliment because the fact that somebody noticed that we didn't go live in 2 weeks and that was a big deal.
I love
Good,
it.
because we're freaking live all the. We're live once, twice a week sometimes.
So yeah, Mark. I'm not trying. I'm trying not. I don't want to say it because we're talking about the basics. You know, we want to stick with the basics.
Basics.
You know, your again brush hog, ribbon tail worm, crawl style bait, creature bait.
JDM is basic in a way. It's just you're going into something that isn't basic to the normal American person.
It is, but it's not basic in the sense of bass fishing. It's finessey, you know, a lot. It's a lot.
Martin, have you been throwing glides recently?
It's a lot of super finesse. It's a lot of super finesse type stuff, which is generally it's for the most outside of like extreme conditions, it's not really necessary because
No,
like you can just go throw a jig or you can just go throw a sweet beaver or something like a D-bomb.
you can absolutely just go throw something similar of the same thing and keep catching fish. But I still like the idea of throwing a plastic, throwing a bait, something that is different.
Again, we use our basics to find the fish, and then we start expanding.
Yes.
So that's the point I'm trying to make is, you know, you use your basics to find the fish,
We go from Rapala to Megabass.
and then you start expanding. I don't own a megabass crankbait. I will fish Rapala over megabass any day of the week.
You should own a couple Megabass crankbaits just to play with them.
So then you start expanding. So maybe maybe they're okay. So they're eating a square bill. You know, I'm throwing a 1.5 square bill. Keep it simple. KVD 1.5, right? Classic square bill. Throwing a KVD 1.5. I know there's fish in here. I know they're eating it. Okay, let me try throwing a 2.5. Maybe a 2.5 is going to get me some bigger bites with a bigger profile. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, well, I got some bites on my 1.5 in Chartreuse Black Back, but they're just barely eating the back hook. Let me try changing color. You know, once you find your fish, then start expanding. Color, you should still, if you keep your colors basic, for tidal water, I would say that you want like a natural shad color, a Chartreuse Black Back, and something like a Chartreuse Blue Back. That's something just a little different, not quite as extreme as the black back, but you have those 3 colors. It doesn't matter which one you tie on. If they're eating a crankbait at all, you should get a bite on them.
Right. Oh yeah.
Now, that's when you have to pay attention to your bites. Okay, well, I've gotten 3 bites on my KVD 1.5 Chartreuse Black Back, but I've barely skin hooked them on the back hook on every one. Let me try the Chartreuse Blue Back. See if they eat that better. You have to listen to the fish, but stick to your basics and then expand. If I'm throwing a crankbait in tidal water, I'm always 100% of the time starting with Chartreuse Black Back. 100% of the time. That will be with the crankbait that's tied on. Do not care what the watercolor looks like. Any of our tidal waters, that's where I'm starting.
Yep.
It could be clear. It could be muddy. That's what I'm starting with if I'm throwing a crankbait. And I'm going to let the fish talk to me after that. Because they will, the fish, you got to listen to the fish. And when you stick to those basics, you can really learn what the fish want and don't want. And then you expand. Start with the basics, then expand. Use your basics, find your fish, expand. You can go into, once you find the fish, because that's the hardest part. Hardest part is always finding the fish.
Oh, yeah.
And then now that I've found them, okay, I can...
Beer time.
Those blue moons are going down quick. So now that I've found the fish, which is the hardest part.
They're gonna miss the UMA Lure Company promo.
I know, right? So now that I found the fish, the hardest part, I'm going to try to expand for a better bite if I need to. Find out what's working, what's not working. Or now that I found the fish, and say we're outside of one of those transition periods, and I know this fish should probably stay there. Now that's when I'm going to go with getting my confidence in maybe a new technique, something that I'm not used to. Maybe, okay, so I know there's fish here. Now, I want to learn how to throw a chatter. I want to learn how to catch fish on a chatterbait. All right, well, I know there's a bunch of fish here. So that's a good opportunity for me to build confidence in a new technique because I know there's fish there. You can't build confidence in a new technique if you don't catch fish on that new technique.
No.
So you have to locate.
You have to generate bites on that technique.
You got to locate your fish first. Locate your fish using your basics. Learn your new techniques after you found your fish. Don't go out and try to find fish using a new technique.
Right.
So Jason said he did that at Anna with a spot.
It makes complete sense to me. You want to go locate fish, find fish, try new technique. Trying to find fish with a new technique is only obviously if it doesn't work out right away.
Even a new bait.
Or within a specific amount of time, or a new bait for that matter.
And it could be similar to something that you throw. But it's a mental thing.
It's going to make you mentally think that something's not going to work when in reality it can work really well. So It's important to be able to identify fish pattern, locate fish, and then try something different.
Yeah, you can. It is 100% mental, and it's not. It may not be. So if you get a new bait, and you're excited to fish that bait, but you don't get a bite in the first 5 minutes of fishing that bait, and that's an arbitrary number that I'm throwing out there. Your mental confidence in that bait is going to diminish exponentially for however long you don't get a bite on it.
Yep.
So the chances of you finding fish with that bait throughout that day are exponentially going down because you're now thinking this bait doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you're not fishing it properly. You're not paying attention to what you're doing as much. There's so much of a mental side of bass fishing that a lot of people don't look into. That he's trying to eat something behind my. I don't know what he's doing. There's so much of a mental side.
You've been doing squats at the gym?
No, I haven't. So, there's that mental side, and a lot of people don't realize, it's not, and it may not be that it's completely debilitating to your fishing, but it just changes the way that you fish just a little bit to where you may not be able to generate the bites that you need outside of your basics that work. I know a jig works. I don't even need a specific brand of jig. I could be fishing on your boat and be like, hey, I just jumped on your boat. Let me get a black and blue jig.
Yep.
I don't, as long as it doesn't get hung up, I don't care. It's jig. Jig's a jig. I got confidence in it. I don't have to worry about brand. I don't have to worry about all these other nuances in it. I know with those basic baits, I know it's gonna work. If I say give me a baby brush hog, and you give me a KVD game hog or a baby destroyer, I know it works.
Yep.
Right. So I automatically have confidence in those basics. If I say give me a Senko, any type of Senko style bait, don't care, all works.
Yep.
They all catch fish.
They will all catch fish.
So that's the biggest thing with sticking to your basics is, you don't need to catch fish on them to know that they catch fish, if that makes sense. You know, there's an inherent confidence in those four categories of baits because they've worked for decades. You know, those four styles of baits have worked for absolute decades, and you don't have to build confidence in them. There's an inherent confidence. So if you always go back to your basics to find your fish, or if you're having trouble, relocating fish, maybe you got on a bite, you found some fish and you were catching them on a jerk bait, and they just stopped eating the jerk bait for whatever reason. Well, okay, let me go back to my basics to make sure that those fish are still here. It may not be that the fish left. It may be that the wind's not blowing that day.
Yep.
It may be that
it could be that pushed on the bank.
Could be those fish. It could be that those fish moved because they're in a transition period. And they moved off of that point up into the moved off that lake, that secondary point at the mouth of that creek, and they moved a little farther up into the creek because they're going back to spawn, or it's a fall and they're following the bait back there. So going back to those basics, let me figure out if those fish are still here. I'm going to try these four things. If these four things don't work, I'm going to move. It's very easy to use those four categories of baits, to locate your fish. It keeps it simple. You can locate fish anywhere. It works on any body of water. You don't need a lot of tackle for it. So you're not loading up your boys. What's going on, Nick?
What's up, Nick?
So you're not loading up your boat with a bunch of, unnecessary tackle. Because let's go back to another thing with keeping it basic: color.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You need two colors:
white and green pumpkin.
Black and blue and green pumpkin. As far as plastic.
White, black, and blue, and green pumpkin. We're gonna add three. We're gonna add one more to that. White, black, and blue, green pumpkin. However, how often do you see somebody throwing a white jig?
Only if I'm throwing a swim jig in the grass.
Yeah, not often.
Yeah, not very often. So, I will tell you, the only white baits that I own, I have two categories of baits. One are white baits that are in my boat.
White matches are bait. So
if I'm throwing plastic, I'm not trying to imitate bait fish. If I'm trying to imitate bait fish, I'm throwing a spinnerbait. I'm throwing a crankbait. Because if they're eating bait fish, they're going to be chasing bait. So I'm not as worried about, again, keeping it basic. I'm not as worried about matching a bait fish with a soft plastic.
Right.
So, and again, I'm not saying it doesn't work.
We're going to go into a whole different
I'm just
thing.
talking about basics.
6 Sense Panorama just came out. That's going to be awesome.
Back to basics. Green pumpkin. If you're looking at just keeping it basic, you need two colors. You need green pumpkin and black and blue. You can maybe extend that to 3. There are some other colors that are situated. Junebug's always a good color.
Junebug's a great color.
Junebug's a great color, especially if you're in like some tannic waters, things like that. So, maybe go with 3 colors. Throw Junebug in there. Black and blue, Junebug, and green pumpkin. Mm-hmm. It's really all you need. If you want to keep it basic and you really want to, like, if you're having trouble, that's what I was getting ready to say. That's funny. So if you're having trouble, your confidence is low. You want to go back to the basics for your plastics and your jigs. Jigs, black and blue, green pumpkin. Plastics, black and blue, green pumpkin, and maybe a June bug or a blue fleck, something like that, something in that purple category. So you don't need every different color in the rainbow. Yes, that's coming up in. We'll do that in just a minute because I'm almost done. Color is kind of the last thing that I wanted to talk about. So so that's for your plastics. You don't need every color under the rainbow. We all know Zoom has 437 colors of trick worms.
It was the most okay. So you said trick worm. It's the most trippy thing ever. When I went into Zoom and just tried to pick out my colors, I was like, "Why do you have 30 variations of GP?"
Yes. So keep it simple.
I'm about to donate a box of conventional tackle to you. 6 cents. Panorama looks great. I'm sure it would work, but focus on what works and catches. Then search for the bigger fish.
Absolutely. And that's our whole point of tonight. So for our crankbaits and our
But hold up,
spinner
Nick,
baits.
I've been throwing conventional the entire time. I've been going to the wrong places and doing the wrong but the right thing at the same time, because I knew where I needed to go and where I wanted to go, but by the time I was able to get there, there were 6 people there. 5, 6 people there. It was like, okay, it's time to go somewhere else and then do something different. And it just never paid off. I stayed conventional. I stayed to some basic things in the wrong areas. Probably in the wrong colors because I was just staying in a box.
Right. So back to colors. So we got crankbaits and spinner baits. What colors do we need to carry for those? Let's start with spinner baits. Honestly, you need 2 colors.
White
and chartreuse and white.
Yeah.
That's if you want to build confidence and you want to catch fish and you want to keep it basic, you need white and chartreuse and white. You have white and chartreuse and white
in the spring. I don't care what anybody says. You should definitely have an orange spinnerbait in the spring.
But again, I'm keeping it basic.
Basic.
So I'm keeping it basic. So
white and white with a little bit of chartreuse.
Exactly, because they work all year round.
Every time.
It works all year round. Yep. It's not situational. If they're going to eat a spinnerbait at any given time, one of those 2 colors is going to work. I caught all my fish on one bait, Martin. Well, not all my bait this year, but I could narrow that down to probably one. Both tournaments I've won, I've caught all my baits off the same on a jig. I'll just say it. Both tournaments I've won this year, both Thursday nighters, caught my fish on jig. Mm-hmm. Every other tournament, I think every fish that I weighed in every other tournament was on a frog.
This has been my worst year of fishing in the GP ever.
So we have our spinnerbait colors. You really only need 2 colors there to keep, again.
Hey, what's up, Greg?
Now we go to crankbaits. Crankbaits, crankbaits kind of like that Zoom, right? You look at 6. You want to log it.
UMA crankbaits.
Right. It doesn't matter who you go to. You go to UMA. You go to if you, for the average person, logs into Tackle Warehouse, looks at 6 cents, and it's funny because it even throws me off. There's 47 different colors of square bill. There's 15 different bluegill colors.
You know what makes it nice sometimes, though, is that when one thing is completely sold out, there's always a variation that is really close that you can get.
Right. So again, keep it simple. Keep it to the stuff that works. A sexy shad type color. Just like a natural shad color, and a chartreuse blackback. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be generally cleaner water. I'll throw that more natural color. Dirtier water, I'll throw that chartreuse blackback. Nice and simple, right? Keeps it basic. You don't get overwhelmed, by having 37 different colors in your tackle box when you open it up. because that could be overwhelming too.
Oh yeah.
When you own all those colors and you look in there and you're like, oh man, which one do I want to throw? Well, you know what? And this is something that that Gerald Swindle said about fishing like your confidence baits. Is, you know what color crankbait he pulls out when it's a tough bite? No matter what the water clarity is.
Chartreuse.
No, whichever one has the most teeth marks in it.
Right on. Okay,
Yeah.
Most of that stuff's just like a shad imitation. For
If it's
me,
just he said that, and that's what he said. You know, if it's a tough bite and I'm having a hard, and I'm struggling, and I need, I think I should be able to catch him on a crankbait, but like I'm kind of spun out. Like I'm just looking at my box and looking, man, that one's got a lot of teeth marks in it. We're tying that one on.
I like it.
Because it works, right?
Yeah.
So keep it, if you keep it basic, keep a natural shad color. I like, so my favorite natural shad color in a crankbait is like a oyster. KVD makes an oyster color, which is, it's just white with a little bit of blue on the top. Missile Baits Cellmate is a good one. It's a nice natural shad color. It's got a little greenish tint to it.
The Mega Bass Sexy Shad.
You can go with your Mega Bass Sexy Shad.
I like the Sexy Shad a lot.
KVD Chartreuse Sexy Shad.
Evergreen makes a really nice shad color. Once again, we're talking about some stuff that isn't quite as basic.
Well, you could.
This is just this is what I'm familiar with. So Lucky Craft makes. I'll throw a lot of Lucky Craft. Lucky Craft, I love Lucky Craft. I just don't know what the name of their baits are. I throw a lot of shad color Lucky Craft.
So, yeah, the brand doesn't really make a difference because it's not. You can throw a Mega Bass square bill.
Well, I can't tell you what the color or the name of a color is if I don't know what what I mean. That's what I'm trying to say. Like I'm trying to list the name of something, but I'm like I can't remember what the name of these freaking Lucky Craft crankbaits I have are.
Yeah, it's so. We're talking about the basics, Kevin. That's not basic.
Yeah,
it's very much not basic. So it doesn't matter. You can go any brand, whatever your favorite brand is. They're going to make, a something in that category. So if you have if your favorite hard bait is Mega Bass, Chad loves Mega Bass. Well, guess what? Mega Bass makes a square bill.
Yep.
Mega Bass makes spinner baits.
A couple different variations.
Yeah. They make a square bill. They make spinner baits. Doesn't you can go ahead and fish them. There's nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with that. I keep my spinner baits super simple. Like I don't go out and buy expensive spinner baits like the Mega Bass because I throw them in some bullshit.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So.
Han.
Shh, Nick. Shh, Nick. Quiet, Nick. We don't talk about that on here. So, again, take your favorite brand, whatever brand you like, knock it down to the basics. If you wanted to stick with, say you wanted to do Mega Bass soft plastics. You like Mega Bass soft plastics. Guess what? Mega Bass makes a beaver.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any Mega Bass soft plastics.
That's beyond basics, Kevin. Basics is starting out with like
it is, but it isn't.
We need to talk about what baits we need to use as far as basic. That's where we're starting. So that's your bait position is beyond the basics. If we're just getting started.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we have quite a few people on here. So we want to announce our promo that we kind of hinted at in our title from UMA Lure Company.
A.
We have been given a promo code for our listeners. Do you want to put that? Type
All the
that.
way
Type it
through.
in the type it in the chat so people can see it.
I will put it in there.
So, UMA Wars is.
It is.
Give me 1 second here. Let me get some details here. So from UMAWars.com, if you go onto their website,
Or
Duke.
click up on the link in our bio from Linktree. It'll be right there. Click on that link and then go to the next link. Bam, umalures.com.
And you will, from now until November 30th, if you enter this code, which Chad is going to put in the Facebook chat here,
Gadoosh.
it is BNBR 2023. That will get you 20% off of your entire order.
20% off of your order on
And-
UMA Lures.
As we were talking about earlier, these are some of the best balsa crankbaits that you can get your hands on. So take advantage of this promo, get your 20% off, get some crankbaits, and get out there and start throwing them. We're starting to get into the fall. It's getting into crankbait season. This is what, this is the time of year. We're starting to get into the time of year where crankbaits are really going to shine from.
Big time.
October till the end of November, crankbaits are really going to be like at the top of my starting lineup.
You want to take them over to the UMA website and show them what they can get for 20% off?
Yeah,
Let's check it out.
we're gonna pull up the website here just to show you. wedge is another good one too. So you have the wedge there.
Oh,
You
yeah,
got
the
skinny.
wedge.
You got the skinny shad. And I'm going to reel it down to depth, and I'm going to slow reel it, and I'm going to pause it every couple of turns. And Kevin, you're commenting under Bass and Beer now. And if you apparently didn't listen to the first part of the show, we were talking about fishing shallow wood. So pay attention, man.
Talking to 30 feet of water. Oh, hang on a second. Okay, so let's throw a weightless wacky rig into 30 feet of water with zero structure in sight.
So I can tell you that I have done that and caught fish doing that.
True.
So all has to know. Chad knows what's up.
Yeah,
That's
Kyle
funny.
always coming up with the good ones.
So, depending on the
show up with something like that.
depending on the situation, you could throw a wacky rig in 30 feet of water with zero structure in sight. It really depends on the situation. But again, we were talking about fishing shallow wood and using our basics to locate our fish. Because hey, guess what? If we're locating fish and we throw a weightless Senko in 30 feet of water and we don't catch any fish, we're gonna try something else.
Oh, it's on next week, Kyle. I'll be there.
You better be there.
Let's go.
We've been missing you.
I'll be there. Yeah, I'll be
I
there.
feel like playing Puff Daddy right now.
I gotta pee, or I'm not gonna be there because my bladder's gonna rupture.
So that's what we're getting at, Kevin, is using the basics to find fish before you start trying new techniques. Because if you throw a wacky rig into 30 feet of water with no structure in sight, you're probably not going to catch fish. Well, guess what? That should probably tell you to cast somewhere else. Again, keeping it basic. You have to figure out what works for you. What I do doesn't necessarily work for Rob, or doesn't necessarily work for Nick and Tom. What they do doesn't work for me. You have to be able to use those basic tools, those 4 basic categories, to be able to find fish that work out in your zone. Because I promise you that I wasn't fishing anything like what you fish. Because we fish completely different. You know how fast I fished. I fished that entire area that you saw me in a half an hour. So you know how fast I fish. We fish very, very much differently, even though we may have been fishing similar baits. So we use your basics to figure out how to catch fish for you. Right. Exactly, Brian. Confidence, and even less so the confidence baits, Brian. I'm talking about sticking to the basics. Because something that might have been my confidence bait last year. I've talked to my buddy about this the other day. Was Rob will kill me for this, but we were talking about flipping a tube. I haven't flipped a tube in years. I used to flip
y'all about to fight at the parking lot.
I used to flip a tube all the time. I haven't flipped a tube in years. I mean, that used to be one of my confidence baits, but I just kind of stopped
It's a
using it. It
very
was one of those
popular
things-
smallmouth thing.
Well, I do fish them for smallmouth.
Right.
I'm talking about flipping a tube in for largemouth.
Yes.
You know, a big 5-inch tube,
Yeah.
flipping a tube for large. I don't. I just stopped doing it. It used to be a confidence bait for me,
Yep.
but those confidence baits change.
Same thing with a shaky head
The
for me.
the basics don't change.
Nope, they do not.
That's the thing that I'm trying to convey is sticking to those basics will always bring you back around to being able to find and catch fish.
Period.
And you know, Kevin's not he's not wrong. You know, bait position obviously matters. I'm just saying outside of the basics, you know, you've got to use the basics to find out what works for you. Worrying about, you know, if you think a fish should be there, how do I apply a bait to catch them? I think in general, we don't look at 30 feet of water and say, I should throw a weightless sink over there. You know, most of what I'm talking about is shallow water. You know, I'm focusing on shallow water fishing. You know, structure that you can see. That's what most of this whole conversation tonight is based around. Mm-hmm. You know, stuff that you can see. You know, structure that you can see. Lay downs. You know, boulder. You know, there might be a big boulder that's sticking up out of the water, or, you know, a big log out of the, you know, in the water. You might see something underneath the water. You know, could be any number of things, but you know, we're mostly, you know, when we're sticking to the basics, you know, to get into, you know, the basic version of that, you're looking for things to cast to. Because you know that how much more basic can you get, right? Than seeing seeing a tree, mm-hmm. seeing a stump, seeing a rock. That's you know, that's keeping it basic.
Yep.
Now we can talk about you know using your electronics to find offshore rock pile.
You're getting more advanced than that.
Way more advanced.
You know how many people don't have basic sonar just to look at the depth in the water temperature?
Keep it simple.
Yep.
You know, keeping it simple is just
stupid.
See the structure, cast to the structure.
Yep, 100%.
100%. If you're throwing a moving bait, you know, you don't necessarily need to see the structure. You know, you can just wind your moving bait down the bank. You know, but if I'm throwing a jig or a Texas rig, well then I want to be looking at that structure. I'm going to be looking at that wood. And even with my spinnerbait and my crankbait, I might be throwing it, you know, as I'm trolling, you know, I'm standing, you know, if I'm in between pieces of structure, I might still be throwing it on the bank, but I'm standing on the trolling motor going to the next piece of structure. And then I'm going to work it around that, you know, that structure. I'm going to make sure that I run it down that log 2 or 3 times. But I'm looking for visible structure when I'm keeping it basic. I'm looking for grass. Grass is another. I left that one out. You know, I'm seeing grass. You know, I'm looking for, you know, it's low tide. I'm looking for, you know, springtime. I'm looking for that, you know, that grass that's, you know, this far below the surface on low tide. You know, that's just starting to come up. You know, it's a visible structure. Or if it's someplace that I know there might be grass there, hey, guess what? Guess what makes a great tool to find grass? A square bill crankbait.
Yeah.
If you're looking for grass that's coming up, throw that square bill out there. You'll find it real quick. You know, if you're in shallow water where there might be grass. And you know, sometimes throwing that square bill crankbait in that grass, in that early grass before it's thick.
Yep.
That's still one of the things that I'm doing.
Right over top of it, just nicking the tip of the grass.
Or I'll go even farther. You know, if you bury it in the grass and snap it out. But you know, that's your 4 baits apply to grass as well. You may have to change your jig to a different style because like a football jig or an arky style jig doesn't come through grass very well. So, you might want to change to more of you want like maybe a vertical line tied jig that's going to come through the grass a little bit better. Something that's got a little like wedge shape to the head, so it comes through the grass a little bit better. For everything else, you don't really have to change anything. Spinnerbait works in the grass. You change your jig. Square bill works in the grass. UMA square bill works in the grass.
Very well.
Tyler drew me in an ABA 1 year, 2 years ago, and we were fishing grass, and he absolutely destroyed me from the back of my boat throwing a UMA square bill in grass. I mean, just obliterated me. I mean, I had 15 pounds a day. His best five was probably 17 or 18. He had 3 fish limit for the rider, but I mean, it was a tough day for everybody. I think I want to say that 16 pounds got you a check. Like I was just below the check line.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was like 2 places below the check line.
I'm looking forward to that.
But and going back to finding out what works for you. You think I didn't put a crankbait on and try to catch fish the same way? Didn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to, like Brian said, I went back to my confidence baits, and I knew what I was. I'd already, based on the conditions and from practice, like I knew what I was going to catch them on. Put on a spook, and I caught my fish on a spook and a buzzbait that day. Yeah. Threw a spook when the tide was high and the water was up over top of it. Mm-hmm. When it got down and grass topped out a little bit, threw a buzzbait, and that's how I caught all my fish that day. So, you can't always catch fish the way that everybody else catches fish. But the basics always work. That's what I'm going to keep hammering that home. The basics always work. You have 4 categories for your basics: spinner baits, crankbaits, jigs, and soft plastics. And by soft plastics, I mean a Texas rig. And keep it simple.
Strike King.
Crawl.
Yamamoto.
Crawl.
Zoom. Something basic.
Crawl, creature, worm.
Yep.
And, keep it basic. A baby brush hog. A rage crawl, a sweet beaver. Just keep it basic. You don't need, the what's that Kitech? The Kitech's got one. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like, I mean, it is like this crazy looking, like
the Savage Gear Tarantula. Just stupid.
Well, it's like I would put it in the same category as like a brush hog, but it's got like all these crazy appendages off of it, and like just keep it simple. It's a brush hog. Brush hogs worked for 30 years.
I want to remind you guys while you're watching that UMA Lure Co, umalureco.com. If you go to umalureco.com, check out their crankbaits. They are running a 20% off promo for all of our Bass and Beer Radio listeners at BNBR 2023.
That's the promo code.
That is the promo code for 20% off your entire order. C-Pops.
Take advantage of it.
Skinny
they
shads.
Are the best crankbaits. I mean,
phenomenal.
I own a lot of them.
Everybody here that is listening to the show has a plastic molded crankbait in their tackle box. Get yourself a couple balsa wood hand carved cranks from our boy Tyler and let it change your life in the cranking game. And like I said before, these are hand carved, hand painted crankbaits. There's a lot of craftsmanship that goes into these, hand tested. Everything you get comes straight from Tyler. It's not just a mass processed
Nope.
crankbait.
You're supporting a small business
Exactly.
and a local, a local
Angler, local angler.
Tyler is, he is a Maryland guy. He is a stick on the Potomac and the Upper Bay. Um, Great guy. One of my favorite people in the bass fishing community. Um, and he makes an amazing product. So go support him. Um, Use that promo code. Buy him out.
Buy them out.
Buy him out.
Lock them up. Another thing that I want to let you guys know is Bass and Beer Radio has a website that we're currently working on right now for merch, for updates on events that Bass and Beer Radio might be throwing in the near future, clips, edits, and stuff that we may decide to post. We have a Discord that we are about to launch for everybody to be engaged. You can post your fish, your lures, any conversation on our Discord page. We know that on Facebook, a lot of times you guys can't post on our Facebook page to engage with us. So we want to make a spot where you guys can engage with us. Let us know what you guys want to hear. Let us know what you guys want to see, and all that good stuff. So, but another thing we got. Bass and Beer Radio merch page. We're still working on this right now. I have more to add to it. Here's the link right now being posted up. But we have a merch page. And it's basic right now, but you know what I mean? Oh yeah.
So that's really all I had tonight. I just wanted to, like I was saying, keep it basic. If you're struggling to catch fish, keep it basic. You don't have to get hung up. A lot of times, and I'm guilty of it myself. You don't have to get hung up on all the newfangled techniques. You don't have to get all the 37,000 different colors. Just stick to the basics if you're having problems. If when you're struggling, go to the basics. Go to what you know. Use that to catch fish. That's my.
Boom. It's the
Go
truth.
back to go back to you know you know to carry on the Kevin's bait positioning. Um, where'd the Facebook go?
Oh. Did it disappear?
Oh, it's over there.
There it is.
I just wanted to check comments.
There it is.
So back to what Kevin was saying, about bait positioning. When we're talking about keeping it basic. So, cast the things that you can see. There's a log in the water. Cast it.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be. The crazy flapper. That's it. Thanks, Martin. So, when when you're struggling, and you're having a hard time catching fish, it can be really mentally taxing, especially when, you go out there and you think it was really tough and everybody else in the tournament catches 15 pounds. I mean, that happened to me and Frank on Saturday. Yeah, I was kind of a kick in the balls. We went out. We were struggling to get bigger bites. We caught quite a few fish. We probably caught 10 or 12 keepers, but we had like 11 and a half pounds, and we were second from last. We were seventh place out of 8 boats, and everyone above us had 15 pounds. 15 to 19 pounds. And that can really hurt you mentally, and that's
Yes,
one of
it
the
can.
reasons that
Absolutely.
I went out. I mean, I went out Tuesday and just, I wasn't expecting to fish last night, so I just went out Tuesday and fished some things and got my head right. I just went back to the basics. I fished an area, caught some fish. Using the basics. Who's a hammer and the nicest dude?
Paul is.
But I'm just curious what Martin, who Martin was talking about. But
Bro,
I went out. My confidence got
I want to see some Bass and Beer Radio bikinis in the
that
future.
awesome.
It's gotta happen.
So I went out Tuesday. We kind of got our teeth kicked in on Saturday, and I went out on Tuesday and was able to. I was able to catch a couple of nice fish. And I did it by going back to the basics. We kind of had an idea of what we needed to do, and it didn't work out for us. So Tuesday I went out. I went back to the basics. I flipped a jig. I really broke down pieces of structure and caught a couple 3-pounders, and I was like, okay, got it. My confidence got back. Okay, I can catch fish here because one of the boats was fishing the same area that we were.
Yep.
And they had 15 pounds and should have had over 20, and we struggled to get 11 pounds. So
I feel that before. I felt that many times before. Many times.
so going back to the basics, built my confidence back up from getting my teeth kicked in. Went to the basics, flipped my jig, caught some fish, got my confidence back up, and was able to use that. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to fish last night, but I used what I found on Tuesday to win the tournament last night. Not necessarily the location, but just by going back to the basics and knowing, hey, I can catch good fish doing this. So that's what that's just what I did on Thursday night. Just flipped a jig all night.
That's what, dude. I'm gonna go out. I don't know exactly what day yet or days, but I'm just gonna go out and I'm gonna do the Texas rig worm. I'm gonna put a jig on. I'm gonna put that spinner bait on, and I'm just gonna go out there and I'm gonna throw around for a couple hours.
Yeah, just tie on
and figure something out.
Like a Texas straight worm or
I'm
like a
showing
baby
back.
brush hog
I'm
or
showing back up to the Thursday nighters this week for a little bit of redemption because it's just been a tough summer. It's been
and
tough.
the best way to do that is, those baits that, like for you, when you struggle, I feel like you get bored and then you just go to throwing like your big baits and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
The best way to break that, leave the big baits at home. And I'll tell that to anyone. It doesn't matter, doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're going back to the basics or you want to learn a new technique. The best way to do that is to leave everything else at home.
Yep.
Only, so if you go out, if you go out this week, take 4 rods, put them on your front deck. Don't pull another rod out. Have those 4 baits on your front deck, and commit yourself to just doing those, those basic techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, you're gonna catch fish. It's gonna build your confidence. You're gonna be able to locate your fish. It gives you confidence in some other baits that maybe you don't throw as frequently because you don't go back to the basics enough. and you'll get back, you'll get your confidence back, and you'll get back, help get you back on track. So on that note, it is 10:04, and I don't have anything else for you guys tonight.
I totally messed that up. Can't remember how to do it. I have to go back. Oh, God damn it, dog. I have to go back in the software and figure out how to do our button layout thing again. But yeah, that's all we have for the night. We're getting late, 10 o'clock. Ready to sign off.
Yeah.
So, like I said before, though, if you guys are watching, UMALureCompany.com. It's right up there in the description. Hit that link tree. It's right there in our link tree, UMA.com. BNBR 2023, 20% off all of your orders all the way through November 30th.
And don't forget, Thursday night, MR Bass Thursday Nighter out of Joppatown. Blast off is at 4:30 this week.
4:30.
So get there early to sign up. They usually start doing sign-ups around 3:30.
Yep.
We're gonna blast off at 4:30. Weigh in at 7:30 this week, so 4:30 to 7:30.
It's
come out and support MR Bass.
Yeah.
They do a lot of great things for the bass fishing in general. They are one of the reasons that the gunpowder has been so good the last couple of years.
Yep.
They have relentlessly pushed stocking and raised money for stocking, and come out and support them, and show them that we appreciate what they do.
Yep. Absolutely. We need to keep 10 boats to keep this thing going. So
Yep.
Thursday night.
As long as we get 10 boats, they'll keep them going. As long as they can. I have a feeling
I'm telling you, man.
Once you get early, once it starts getting earlier, then it's going to start interfering with work. I know a couple of guys that
4:30 is going to interfere with work, but man, the fishing is only going to get better as the water temperature starts to fall a little bit.
It's falling too.
Yeah.
It's in the low 70s.
Don't say too much.
I'm just saying it's in the low 70s.
Nuh-uh. That was fast.
Well, these cool nights. I mean, we've had quite a few cool nights. Now, it's not saying it's not.
It's time to get out there is what it's time.
It's September.
It's time to get out there and fish.
Keep in mind, it's September. The temperatures are going to spike. It doesn't take much to get those temperatures back up into the 80s. If we get a week of warm weather next week, it's going to push those temperatures back up. But after that storm, I mean, we were looking at like 72-degree water. So
true. Right on. All right, everybody. Well, that is it for us tonight. We are bouncing out of here. We will give you some more information throughout the week. Click that link. Go to UMALureCompany.com. Go to the merch website. Get you a hoodie. Get you a long sleeve shirt. It's about to start cooling off. Support Bass and Beer Radio. Any profits we make off that, we're rolling right back into giveaways for you. So if you buy a hoodie, guess what? Whatever we make, we're putting it back to you. So click that link. Get you a shirt. It's not that much. It's like $20 bucks, $21 for a long sleeve. We appreciate it. They're stylish. They look good. I got a couple on the way myself.
Advertise, yeah.
So
advertise Bass and Beer. Get us out there. The bigger we get, the more we can put back into you, and that's really all we want is
absolutely.
We want Bass and Beer to be a.
We're trying to fund our page.
We're just trying to. All of this is for, for our listeners. We love you guys.
100%.
And we want to be able to give things back to you, and this will help us do that.
So we've already talked about the tournament that we want to throw here come the fall. So we need to fund that and start getting some funds going so that we can take care of that. And that's one way that we're going to do it. So pick up a couple shirts and get ready for some more information on that tournament coming up in October, correct? We decided on October?
October might be tough. It might be. October might be tough.
Okay. So, like I said,
but
we're still deciding on the date, but it will be in the November-ish to October-ish area, and we will get back to you on that. But that is when we'll be throwing our tournament up on Conowingo.
All right, guys.
All
Have
right.
a great night. Get out, do some fishing this weekend. I'm going to fish with Mr. Bob Murphy and the crew on Sunday. And I will see some of you guys then.
Peace.